They thought, okay, this will be good for us. And there will still be some small number of crazies, but they will not be able to take over the party. How'd that work out?
Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
Good night and good luck.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Lincoln Project Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rick Wilson. I am delighted to be joined today by Dave Daley. Dave Daley is an expert on redistricting, and redistricting is a story we're all talking about right now because of the shenanigans in Texas, the responses to those shenanigans that are about to happen in California and New York and Illinois and Florida and Georgia and Missouri, and ping pong back and forth. He is the author of two tremendous books on redistricting. One is called Antidemocratic, Inside the Right's 50-Year Plot to Control American Elections, which is a tremendous book, which I have read. And he's got another one, which I need to read because it has one of the best titles I've ever seen. It's called Rat Fucked, Why Your Vote Doesn't Count. Dave, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on today, man. I really appreciate it. Let's start out talking a little bit about how redistricting has evolved. Before we get to Texas, how redistricting has evolved in the last couple of years and the last couple of decades into this incredibly corrupt process that is anti-democratic with that small d.
No, it's a great question. We have had gerrymandering in this country as long as we've had politicians. We had gerrymandering before they even called it gerrymandering, right? Patrick Henry trying to draw James Madison out of our very first Congress.
That's right.
Right. It takes its name from Elbridge Gerry, the governor of Massachusetts in 1812, who drew these crazy districts for the state Senate that people thought looked like a salamander. But what's happening right now, these are not Elbridge Gerry's gerrymanders. They're not even the gerrymanders that were drawn in the 80s and the 90s or 2000s. The kind of computer technology, the availability of voluminous voter data, the power and the speed of today's computers has turned gerrymandering from something politicians did on the back of a napkin to something done on a supercomputer. It's a video game now, going up and down blocks, knowing exactly who lives in all of these houses. So now the power to draw these district lines is really the power to select winners and losers for a decade. And we have 398 of 435 U.S. House seats that were non-competitive in 2024. So we have states that were gerrymandered back in 2010, 2011 that have not been able to shake control, that even when majorities of voters in these states come forth and say, we want to change our government, these majorities are stifled by the maps. And this is a really dangerous situation, and it's getting worse.
You know, I've been through gerrymandering in a bunch of states when I was a consultant, and I've watched it happen. My ex-wife did gerrymandering in Florida for the congressional districts. Maybe she'd take offense to the word gerrymandering, but who knows? In Florida back in the 2000s.
Yeah.
And that was a process. You're absolutely right. Part of this is that, like, the granularity of the data now is so much more sophisticated. And the speed of the computers is so much more sophisticated. When they used to redraw a map, it took days of compute time to redraw a map. It took long days of compute time. And if one thing had to be redone, it was back to square one. Now it's in the blink of an eye. And it really has become a sort of curation process for a lot of these officials. And folks, when I say this, and I know David will agree with me, gerrymandering is not exclusive to the Republican Party. This is a game that is played by the Democrats in Democratic states with the same fervor and vigor. And I know no one wants to unilaterally disarm on this, but it really has become a very corrupting influence in our politics.
The story that I tell in Rat Fucked is the story of modern American redistricting. And I really think that the technological version, the high-tech gerrymanders, really began in the 2011-2012 cycle.
Yeah.
And Republicans recognized the potential of gerrymandering to become a high-tech blunt force partisan weapon at a time when
Sure.
Democrats still thought it was the same old, maybe will help an incumbent here game. And Republicans after the 2008 election that elects Barack Obama in a big way, Democratic
Mhm.
supermajority in the US Senate, big gains, the smartest Democrats and Republicans on both sides that night talking about how generational politics, demographics of the nation going to turn this into um, a democratic country for many, many years to come.
Remember Jim Carville wrote a book that said that argued they were gonna have a 40-year majority.
Yeah, right? And it lasted 2 years because some really, really smart Republican consultants recognized that 2010, was a census year, and what do we do after the census? We redistrict, and they came up with a strategy called RedMap, the Redistricting Majority Project. They got 30 million bucks from the Chamber of Commerce and some other Republican entities to
And
go
so
into state
and a
legislatures.
pair of brothers, we all know.
That's right. And they went into, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, North
Yep.
Carolina, and it targeted specific state legislative districts with the
Mhm.
intention of, flipping control ahead of redistricting and then
Yep.
coming in with these maps and these map makers and the software in 2012 to draw lines that they would not be able to lose on for a decade.
Yep.
So redistricting became the GOP's path back to power. I would argue that it helped create, that the establishment forces that strategized this in 2010 and 2012 ended up backfiring
Dying
on
because of it.
them and creating a more extreme map and a more extreme party that sort of pushed them out, and that Donald Trump was there to sweep up the pieces
Look,
of it.
I was
Did.
one of those guys, Dave. I was one of those guys.
Yeah.
That I worked in that space, and
Mhm.
the degree to which Republican establishment types did not recognize that by drawing these districts, we would incentivize
Right.
a set of behaviors that would fall into the same, ratchet that only went in one direction. They thought, "Okay, this will be good for us, and there will still be some small number of crazies, but they will not be able to take over the party." How'd that work out?
You know, Mark Meadows takes power in 2012 in North Carolina through redistricting. There's this one district in North Carolina that was key to the entire map. Republicans wanted to draw a 10-3 map in North Carolina. The way to get there was by cracking the city of Asheville, kind of blue hippie
Yep.
vegan city out in the Western Mountains in half. It had been a swing district. It went back and forth between
Mhm.
Republicans, between a conservative Democrat for some time.
Yep.
As soon as the district was drawn, Heath Schuler, the conservative Democrat, the Tennessee quarterback, said, "I can't win
A
here."
football player, yeah.
Exactly. Said, "I'm out." And a handful of Republicans competed for the primary, and the Republican primary became the most important thing. All you had to do was win 40% to move on. And there's one day in the park, a campaign event, and there's a handful of Republicans addressing a question about Barack Obama's birth certificate. And the guy who had been the leader, who everybody thought was going to win that seat, a more moderate establishment type, said, "Oh, I think he was probably born here." And the next person up on stage said, "If I'm elected, I will send Barack Obama back to Kenya or wherever it is that he came from."
When the more we find out, the more we realize how wrong the direction we're going. And so what we're going to do is take back our country. 2012 is the time that we're going to send Mr. Obama home to Kenya or wherever it is. We're going to do it.
That was Mark Meadows. Mark Meadows won that election. Mark Meadows goes to Congress, right? And he's the guy who files the parliamentary motion to vacate the chair that pushes John Boehner out. Mark Meadows is responsible for the government shutdown over Obamacare in 2013. This is the start of things sliding in an uncontrollable direction, all due to somebody who holds his seat due to extreme gerrymandering.
There have been some attempts to push back on gerrymandering. In Florida, back in 2010, we had Amendment 5 and 6, which
Uh-huh.
I fought against because I was a Republican being paid to fight against it at the time. But 5 and 6 won. People wanted nonpartisan gerrymander or nonpartisan redistricting. In California and other states, they have independent commission redistricting. Why does none of it ever work?
Well, in Florida, it didn't work because the Republicans ignored it, right? They went ahead and they
Correct.
just and they
Correct.
steamrolled over the Constitution, and they said, "We're gonna do it anyway. We're gonna find a way to sneak some maps into the process
Uh-huh.
under the name
The
inter."
legislative map exemption,
Yeah,
what is the secret sauce there.
voters hate this. 60%, and if you wanna win a ballot initiative in Florida, you need 60% of the vote.
It's a
This
heavy lift,
one
trust me.
This one in Florida was 60% of the Tea Party year,
Yeah.
which, says that voters are in favor of this.
I believe it's actually 60. I think it got
I think
64%
that's
in the
right.
end.
It's right up there, right? So
Five got, like, a point higher than whatever it was,
you
but
need
yeah,
Republicans, Democrats, and independents to come along, and
everybody wanted it.
everybody did. Everybody did in Michigan when this was on the ballot. When it was on the ballot in Ohio in 2018, it won in Utah, it won in Colorado, Missouri, Arizona established a commission, New York, California. So these are popular wherever they are, but for politicians, the power to draw these lines, really, really matters. And so they steamroll these commissions wherever they possibly can. We've seen in Arizona how Republicans have figured out how to game the system there and take over the nonpartisan board that appoints the independent chair, and that helps I
Right.
mean, in Iowa, they simply
So talk about that a little bit, because that is something I think that a lot of people, we have these independent commissions that still end up, whether if they're in a red state, they end up with red district outcomes,
Mhm.
a blue state, blue district outcomes. Talk about why those commissions, how they're stacked, so people understand that.
Too often, commissions are not truly independent, right? I mean, in Arizona, it's a five-person commission, two appointed by Democrats, two appointed by Republicans, one appointed through this nonpartisan process. And because it's so important, everybody says, well, we're going to try to game it by pushing through a Trojan horse as the independent chair. In Ohio in 2021, voters put real limits on partisan gerrymandering, real constitutional limits. And the Republicans in power there simply steamrolled even the state Supreme Court, that not once, not twice, not three times, seven different times said the state legislative and congressional districts that you have drawn here are unconstitutional. And Republicans stalled. They ran out the clock. They found a couple of Federalist Society judges who were willing to say, time's up, guys. The last map you had is just fine by us. And the gerrymander holds. So in a lot of states, voters have tried and tried to rein in politicians, and the politicians have not proven rein-inable. And, I think that all of this, in many ways, can be laid at the doorstep of John Roberts as well for closing the doors to the federal courts that we need in this moment to be an honest broker, to stand up for voters against politicians trying to rig lines. And Roberts took them out of that business. I would suggest quite disingenuously and quite intentionally.
I think it was very intentional because, folks, what happens now is the only person or the only entity that can complain now about the legality of federal election districts is the DOJ, which, with a Democratic president, they will obviously revert back to the states immediately. They'll find a case to send it back to the states. But I mean, this is a, I mean, we always worry in this country about the decline of public trust and confidence in our institutions. But this is, I think, in a weird way, redistricting is one of those things that's one of the most corrosive aspects of that. It's one of the most pernicious aspects of that, because people, they get it. They get that the system is rigged. It's gamed. And in Republican states, they're delighted about it. In Democratic states, they're often delighted about it. I will say Republicans are better at doing this than Democrats are, just objectively, because in New York, Kathy Hochul and the Democrats in New York too, or sorry, now, God, now I feel old, man. It's 6 years ago now, 5 years ago now, I guess. They had an opportunity to do redistricting, and they chose to let it stand basically where it was. So we ended up in New York with the Republicans holding on to, I'm going to argue, 3, possibly 4 seats that could have been redistricted if the Democrats were playing hardball. You wouldn't have a Michael Lawler. You might not have an Elise Stefanik. You might not have a Nicola Loda if they had done the work properly, but they got rolled and didn't. So no Republican state is ever going to let that happen, because they work from the top down and they take orders from DC, and they're never going to let that sort of fundamental mistake slip past them. So we end up now with the big gunfight going on in Texas right now, which is, they're going to pass this thing eventually. We all know that. Um, but talk to us about how unusual it is for a president to essentially order a redistricting hit like the one we're seeing in
Oh,
Texas.
this is very unusual. You don't see mid-decade redistricting happen very often
No.
anyway,
Oh God,
let
no.
alone at the behest of a president who picks up the phone, you know, like he's calling Georgia looking for 11,000 votes,
11,000 votes.
calling Texas and saying, "I need 5 more congressional seats," and then the entire state Republican apparatus rolling over to try to find them for him. Listen, I think you're right. I think Republicans have recognized and taken more seriously the power of gerrymandering and redistricting. I think all of this gerrymandering is bad for voters, bad for these states, bad for democracy, bad for representation. But it's a national game, right? And when one party is going out of its way to maximize its gains, and the other party is not, it skews the national playing field in such a way that it sets up the kind of fight that we are seeing right now, in which California has the gold standard of independent commissions, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, 4 independents chosen through a very careful process. These guys are writing essays, they're subjected to background checks. It is an intense process, and they spend years on it, and have done a pretty good job and gotten it right. It's a commission that has worked well, but, now voters are looking to essentially jettison it for partisan purposes in order to come up with the 5 seats that Texas is looking to steal in the middle of the decade. And the problem for Democrats here is that the math just doesn't add up. You rattled off all the states at the beginning. Texas and California, assuming California even is able to pass this in November, and I don't think it's an automatic deal that, voters, after being told how bad gerrymandering is for a decade plus, are going to turn around and endorse a 48-4 map that blows the other side into smithereens. Even in these partisan days, that feels like a stretch. But Republicans are not going to stop in Texas. They're going to go on to Ohio next, Missouri, Indiana, Florida. They can go to Georgia, Kansas, Kentucky, New Hampshire, North Carolina if they want.
I will say I think they have some higher bars in some of those other states for the Republicans to
It would be
do
tricky. Yeah.
because they're already so maxed out.
Um, they can
You
get one in Missouri pretty easily, one in Indiana pretty easily.
I don't think they can get more than 2 in Florida, and maybe 1 is an easier argument.
DeSantis is talking about 5, and I think he's
Yeah,
nuts.
his people are bragging between 5 and 7,
They're
and
nuts.
it doesn't work.
They took
It the
4
the gr yeah,
already in 21 to make
the
it 10
growth
to 8.
yeah, the growth areas since 21, since the 2020, since the growth areas, there's been a large die-off on the West
Yeah.
Coast of boomers, and a lot of the people that have moved into that Orlando metro are younger, less affluent, more Hispanic, and it is not what they think it is. I think they're opening a very dangerous box
I think you're
in
right.
um,
But
but
Democrats are maxed out too. Democrats are maxed out in Illinois, where they've got a 14-3 map already. 82% of the seats that they're holding off of 53% of the two-party congressional vote. Good luck stretching that to 15 or 16. I don't think it can be done. The state court in Maryland has already said no to an 8-0 map. Governor of Oregon has already said, we're not going to turn a 5-1 map into 6-0. They've lost complete control in Nevada. Nowhere really in New Mexico. New York can't go until 2028. I don't see a road.
I'm told there's a legal hook they could try in New York to get it sooner.
It's a very tough road. I mean, here we are, Colorado seems to be talking about trying to unwind its commission, but they can't get that done ahead of 2026. So it's going to be tough for Democrats with the math here. I think they're going to have to really look seriously at where they can still do persuasion. There's going to be 15 or 16 swing districts left in the country. They're going to have to go in there and make a case to voters, even where their brand is toxic, and run and win.
Part of what we've seen for a long time now is that the Republicans work on this assumption that they can't be stopped legally. In a lot of places they can't.
That's right.
I will say though that there are weird flickers even in the Florida Supreme Court where they've been like, wait a minute, you don't get to just arbitrarily on voting rights matters, which is unusual. It's a very conservative court.
Yes.
Um, it was every member on it was named by either Ron DeSantis or Rick Scott at this point. So
Which was not the
they-
case in 2015 when they
That
threw
is
out the
correct.
previous map.
That is correct. But they have shown some interesting independence there. I think on the Georgia Supreme Court, there's also a possibility that you will see some people who are not as enthusiastic about upholding some of this stuff as otherwise might. There is going to have to be a tidal wave of litigation on these cases in Texas, on the stuff on Texas in particular. So let's move on to one broader question. You now see Trump wanting to intervene in in state elections at the federal level, which is another completely unprecedented, illegal, unconstitutional, all those things. We know what they are. What should the states be doing to countervail on this front, aside from just suing the shit out of him?
Yeah. They can't cooperate, right? I
Right.
mean, when he asks for voting rolls, they have to do what the
Yeah.
state, Secretary of State in Mississippi told him, go jump in the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
The Secretary of State in Maine the other day said, go jump in the Gulf of Maine.
Yeah.
We know what the play is here, right? The play is that they are trying to get whatever information that they can in order to try and claim that there is somehow voter fraud or that the election has been stolen from them. And what we know about voter fraud in this country is that it doesn't really exist.
It's,
And
I've said this a million times. Voter fraud is a onesie-twosie bullshit thing that is like some guy gets his cousin's absentee ballot. It is not some secret satellite beaming absentee voter votes down into the computers. It's just it's an absurdity. And I can tell you, since I have done work in the great state of Florida, in the metropolitan area of Miami, and in New Orleans and in New York City, I would tell you if voter fraud was real, I could find it. I would know about it. Believe me, at this point, I would know about it.
it
It just
doesn't exist.
it ain't there.
It can't be proven. There's no examples, right? I mean, Hans von Spakovsky at the Heritage Foundation has his database of 1,400 cases since
It's
1981.
total
Them are a joke.
bullshit. The True the Vote people for
Somebody
years
in
were
the
like,
villages in Florida also
Right,
trying to
right.
vote in Michigan.
right, so people in the villages vote in 2 states.
Yeah.
And folks, if you're curious about the politics of Sumter County, where the villages in Florida is located, it is to the right of the Northwest Frontier province of Pakistan. It is so far to the right that it like words don't exist to tell you how red that area is. Um, but yeah, I mean, it does strike me that we've got this uh, you know this culture on the right now that believes the elections are stolen if they
Right.
don't win them, and that believes that mail voting is obviously fraudulent, except
Except
like
when Donald
today-
Trump wins in 2024, right? With
Yeah.
lots of mail-in voting. Donald
right with
Trump's voted
lots of mail-in
mail-in
voting.
his entire life.
And look, there is also a massive Republican apparatus
Mm-hmm.
built to do mail-in voting and to bank votes
And they're
early.
good at it.
Fuck yeah, they're good at it.
Really good at
It
it.
was our secret sauce in Florida for a generation.
Yes.
We won races for a generation by doing early, by getting absentee and early voting done for a generation. The
Mhm.
Democrats for a long time were like, oh no, we're
Right.
going to turn our people out on election day.
Right.
We were like, no, we'll just
Yeah.
go ahead and bank 25, 30% of the electorate beforehand.
All good.
Good luck.
Yep.
And we curated those votes. We knew who
Of
they
course.
were. So, well, Dave, what would you suggest? I mean, if you were king
Yeah.
at this point, how would you fix redistricting in this country?
I think we need a more proportional House. I think we need to do away with the kind of single member districts that make the lines the most important thing in determining winners and losers and switch to a more proportional system, right? I mean, multi-member districts use ranked choice voting. Jamie Raskin and Don Beyer call this the Fair Representation Act in the House.
Yep.
It's how you get rid of gerrymandering, and it's how you bring fair maps to every single state. What we need is a
Right.
national solution to a national problem. So we need to end partisan gerrymandering, but we also need fair maps every place, right? I mean, I'm talking to you from Massachusetts. 9
Right.
Democrats here, 9-0 delegation, even though there's plenty of Republicans.
Sure.
If we had 3 districts of 3 elected proportionally, you'd have a 6-3 delegation. You'd have the opposite in Tennessee. So this is what really fixes it, but it's also what brings normal people back to Congress again.
Sure.
Right? I mean, New England Republicans,
They exist.
Southern Democrats, they were the secret sauce in finding consensus in the old days, right? So
Listen,
let's get some of them back.
I worked with when I was in the administration. I worked a lot with Sam Nunn,
Right.
who was a very, very conservative Democrat, especially on foreign policy matters.
And I grew up in Connecticut with Lowell Weicker, working in Lowell
Yeah,
Weicker's
exactly.
office. And
And these were
but these
people who
guys-
could bridge
yes,
between the sides of the parties and sit down and be a center of gravity where shit got done.
they don't exist anymore,
No,
and
they-
that's
they-
why no
they-
shit gets done.
And the few who pretend that they do, Susan Collins and
Mhm.
Murkowski, they're not. And for our, for my Democratic friends, this would mean you would lose a lot of progressive seats in the country. You would have more moderates in the party, and so would the Republicans. The Republicans would lose a lot of these crazies too. And for African American elected members of Congress, they would lose the security of having 80% of their modeled vote be African American. They would perhaps have 60 or 40%. They would probably still win their seats.
People would win in proportion to their numbers.
Yeah.
No more, no less.
And it would stop the perverse incentive structures, right? That have built up inside the parties to do this for so long.
When you have 400 non-competitive districts, it means that the only election that matters in all of those
Is the
places is the
primary.
party primary. And if you've got 10 candidates running in the primary, because that's the thing that matters the most, someone can win that with 18% of the vote.
Then
And
the craziest guy in that primary is going to be the
Craziest
guy
guy-
who gets.
coasts.
Yep.
And he's been picked by a fraction of voters, and you can't do anything to get him out of office. And that's
Nope.
where we are. That's the
crazy.
problem in the U.S. House.
It's crazy. Well, Dave Daley, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. Folks, the books are rat-fucked. Why Your Vote Doesn't Count. One of the best titles I've ever heard. And the other book is Antidemocratic, the Right's 50-year plan to take over American elections. They are excellent. Dave is super smart about this. I look forward to having you back on the show again soon as we sort of see where the maps fall in this crazy year. And thank you so much for coming on today, Dave.
Anytime at all, Rick. So grateful for the work you all do. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Good night and good luck.